Hello, this is a short video about wood for those of you who are doing DT, but wood isn't one of your main specialist subjects, but you still want a good overview so that when you get to the multiple choice in section A, you'll still have a good knowledge of being able to answer the basic questions. Okay, now I'm going deliberately fast. I'm talking relatively fast because this is meant to be a quick introduction. It's not meant to be a detailed lesson, but you can pause anytime to read what's on the screen if you want more detail. So, where does wood come from? Well, obviously, it comes from trees. The trees are cut down, they are taken to a sawmill, and then they are converted into usable forms for us to use. Now, you don't need to know all of this detail necessarily, but I thought it's a good overview, and it's really not rocket science, and it's good to just remember in case something like this comes up, because it's got a very good environmental signature, a kind of a footprint, a low carbon footprint, there's a technical term for you, and a good sustainability kind of profile, good sustainability rating, because it's a natural product. Now, FSC is important. This is the Forestry Stewardship Council. FSC basically means that the forest is a managed forest, so the tree that's being cut down comes from a managed forest, meaning they're always planting new trees, whilst cutting down the old trees, so they are always trees growing. They are not leading to deforestation, and there is the key word for you that you don't get in the FSC forest. So ideally you've got an FSC forest where they're continually going new trees as well as cutting down old trees, and then they basically will cut down a tree, and this little video just shows you how quickly you can cut down a tree nowadays. It's pretty incredible. They can literally cut it down, and then the machine kind of goes zook, and then takes off all the branches and then cuts into segments. Pretty incredible. Okay, so the truck goes to the sawmill, which is the place where it all gets turned into planks and whatever for us to use. It's debarked. It's then cut into lengths, and it's left to dry, to be seasoned. Okay, don't worry about that. Basically, it's being cut into planks. Now, seasoning. Seasoning is important. So there are two types of seasoning, kiln seasoning and air seasoning. You don't necessarily need to know those two differences, but what is important is why do you season? To dry out the wood, because it's full of moisture and you don't want it to crack. For example, if you had floorboards and you just took wood fresh off a tree with lots of moisture in it and you made your floorboards, in a year or two they would be cracking and there'd be gaps between them because they were warping and changing shape as they dried out. So seasoning is drying it out. For those of you who are interested, kiln seasoning, which is on the left over here, this is the one where you put it into a big sealed area and you pump in lots of hot air. It's very, very high in energy. It costs a lot of money, but it does it only in a couple of weeks. Whereas air seasoning like this is literally old school, where you literally just pile your wood up with gaps in between, make sure the rain doesn't land on it, there's lots of air flowing, and you leave it there for a couple of years. So it's got a lower carbon footprint, but it takes years, as opposed to a higher carbon footprint, higher cost, with kiln seasoning, which takes weeks. Okay, now don't worry about that, don't worry about that, don't worry about that. And if you want to, you can read this to see some more detail as to why we season, but I won't talk about it now, because this is the simple guide to wood. So there's a bit of air seasoning. Feel free to pause and read if you want to. Again, feel free to pause if you want to. Here's some kiln seasoning. Okay, and then it is delivered to timber yards for us to buy. Okay, and if you want to, you can look at that as just a bit of general knowledge, but if you're not doing wood as a specialist for your DT exam, you don't need to know this. Okay, now, applications of woods. Woods, basically, they're used just everywhere around us, right back from sailing ships all the way to our floors. Okay, now, this is important, and this is something you definitely do need to know about if you're a non-specialist. Now, you don't need to know about all of these examples. I'll give you one example you should know. So if somebody in an exam, if they said, name a softwood, you should be able to name pine. So, softwoods have spiky leaves. They are cone-bearing trees, coniferous, think Christmas tree, and they are usually evergreen. Again, think Christmas tree, think of a pine tree. So pine tree, okay, pine tree, it's got spiky leaves, it's usually got cones, and it is evergreen, meaning it doesn't lose its leaves in winter. Hardwoods, they usually lose their leaves in winter, like this oak tree. Okay, so they have broad leaves, they are deciduous, and they lose their leaves in the winter. And a good example is oak. Okay, Now, manufactured boards. Manufactured boards are an interesting one. So this little pop quiz there, why will we never find a manufactured board tree? Well, basically, that's because they are made by people. Sometimes it's called man-made board. I don't agree with this term. It's manufactured board to me, but in an exam, it might be called man-made board. But basically, to give you an introduction, the trees are lumbered as usual. They're all cut up. But then instead of those planks or whatever else being left and sold as standard wood, like, for example, this pine batten, we get sheets of material, which you can see are very, very large. Okay, so do you need to know all of these? No, you do not. I'll show you the 3 that you should be familiar with, and no, you don't need to know all of these facts unless it is a specialist subject for you. Okay, plywood. Plywood is recognizable because it's got these layers. If you see a piece of wood with all these parallel lines on the side, it is plywood. Okay, plywood. Now, these are different types of plywood, and the key thing they've all got is on the side of plywood you will see all of these parallel lines. Okay, then we get chipboard, which is literally wood chips that have been glued and squashed together, and that is what a lot of your office furniture and school furniture is made of. It's got a plastic veneer on the outside and it's chipboard on the inside. So that's chips, wood chips, and the last one is MDF, which is sawdust, which has been glued and squashed together, compressed together, and again usually has a protective plastic outside layer, and a lot of furniture is made that way. Okay, so we've gone through that already. So properties of woods. Now, it's difficult to say all of them are exactly the same, but what they do have in common is they're electrical insulators, they're thermal insulators, they do absorb moisture if you don't treat them. So if you get an outdoor product, a wooden product, that is not being treated by, for example, wax or oil or varnish, it will soak up wood, it'll soak up water, and then it'll rot over time. Okay, and these are obvious. Yeah, you can't see through them. It's not magnetic, and it's got low resistance to degradation, meaning it breaks down and degrades unless it's treated, which links to it absorbing moisture. Also, bugs can eat it as well if it's not treated. Yes, it is very aesthetically looking. It's pretty, yeah? It's very pretty. You can see the beautiful grain of the wood, okay? Now, mechanical properties, it's generally got good compressive strength and it resists flexing across the grain, okay? So, this is a deliberate whistle-stop tour of woods. It's not aimed at people who are doing woods in a specialized way. I'm just trying to get to the top again. There we go. This is a whistle-stop tour of wood. It is for non-specialists, for answering your MCQ questions, your multiple choice questions, and I hope it's been useful to you. And good luck with your exam. Bye-bye.